The younger generation might just not know, I'm part of the younger generation, but the youngest generation of people who are watching TYT Sports might not know or have only looked at it in the past, not remembering that Kobe Bryant and Chris Paul were supposed to share the same backcourt in 2011, following the decision to have a shortened season after the lockout, which started on Christmas Day, 66 games. That was the last time the Knicks won a playoff series. That has nothing to do with this. David Stern, then commissioner of the NBA, decided to veto, to ixnay, to get rid of the trade that was on the table that involved players like Pau Gasol and Lamar Odom, the Houston Rockets, the Los Angeles Lakers, and the New Orleans Hornets. Because there was no owner of the Hornets at the time, the 29 other owners were pitching in to pretty much keep it afloat, and Stern was in charge of the operations. But then a week later, after the vetoed trade, Chris Paul went to the Los Angeles Clippers. Now, David Stern, 5 years later, breaks his radio silence on the Chris Paul trade. And let's get to those quotes, because they are fun. When asked about it, he goes, "I'm going to correct your language. What cancellation? The GM, Dell Demps, was not authorized to make that trade because you told him not to make the trade. And acting on behalf of the owners, we decided not to make it. I was an owner rep. There was nothing to void. It just never got made." Next quote. "When you're the commissioner and you have two teams that are ticked off at you, as in the Lakers and Houston, and the GMs, without wanting to be attributed, spend their time trashing you, the wrong impression can be granted. It was one of the few times I decided to just go radio silent and let it play out, and I got killed." So the answer is, there was never a trade. It was never approved by me as the owner rep. No. Wrong, David Stern. There was a trade. The trade was on the table. You decided to veto it for basketball reasons, and those reasons being the same reason you vetoed even the conversation to come up to send Chris Paul to New York. Because that was also on the table, was Chris Paul to the New York Knicks. That wasn't happening. And the Lakers, because you looked at that and you said, there is no way I can speak on behalf of the 27 other owners that don't have a big market like New York or LA and send Chris Paul there. And the reason that makes sense is because you opted to make the Clippers market go up, understandably from a business sense and a competitive sense, but not understandably from a fair is fair sense.
Do you think that move not happening is part of the reason the Lakers are kind of where they are now? Like, do you see that?
That move would have been so drastically landscape changing for the Rockets, for the Rockets, for the Hornets, and for the Lakers in that sense. And the problem with the what if game that we play all so often is that we pretend, just to make the laws seem okay and consistent, that it just would have been that Pau Gasol goes to the Hornets, or I think it might have been the Rockets, and Lamar Odom to one of those teams, and Chris Paul shares a backcourt with Kobe Bryant. Well, does that mean that Kobe Bryant tears his Achilles? Does it mean the Clippers have Blake Griffin and go 30-52 the rest of their seasons? Like, what's the actual outcome? We don't know. But what's frustrating about it is this kind of smells like bullshit from David Stern, where he still doesn't want to take any heat for making a decision that benefited the 29 guys, or I should say the 27 guys who have tons of money and not get roasted by them, because you do speak on behalf of the owner. It's the danger of having a commissioner in charge of a team, because there was no owner. They didn't want Chris Paul, who he saw, and part of the reasoning for denying the Lakers trade at first was David Stern saw it as the Chris Paul is the future of the Hornets, and how am I ever going to sell this team without their future player there? But then a week later, he goes to the Clippers. So you simply didn't want one of the two of the three biggest markets in basketball to take one of the best players and form, hilariously, in a way, a super team.
So, in a way, Stern is largely viewed upon as a hero when it comes to the Clippers in Los Angeles, because he helped and started to turn around for what we've seen. The Clippers make that. I mean, that was at what point? I'm just a little rusty in my history. At what point did we start to see the Clippers overshadow the Los Angeles Lakers?
The day that trade happened, no? Well, Kobe got injured. Took a year. Kobe got injured, but the Clippers were on the rise because they had Blake Griffin, who was the number one overall pick and was a very exciting player. As the article from ESPN put it on the day that trade happened was, they are part of the people who kind of coined Lob City, because Chris Paul would be throwing it up for great Blake Griffin when he was even 5 years ago,
Yeah.
was jumping over cars.
Well, I remember when I saw the article around that time. It says the day Los Angeles turned blue or red or whatever color it was.
The Manchester Derby reference. Yeah,
rather
of course.
rather than it be. And it's kind of funny because similar things happen in any sport. It's those monumental movements. One player, not just because of their ability, but just the whole personality of the team changes. They start to gain more confidence. Like a player like Chris Paul at that point, opting to choose the Clippers over the glorious Los Angeles Lakers, even though things went to adjust that movement. But here's the other question I have, because again, I'm a student here, finding out asking more questions to the professor.
Bring it.
Professor, the ownership of the Clippers at that point was Donald Sterling, right? So how much do you think he had involvement with Stern? And because if you're saying that Stern's got ownership of a team that doesn't want to let this player go because he's the staple of that franchise, and the only way to get them sold is to sell them with Chris Paul.
Have some stock, yeah.
So how is there not more questions being asked as to their relationship between Stern, the other owners, and Donald Sterling?
So to your point on Donald Sterling and your question on it, obviously he had some effect because he was one of, like I keep alluding to, the 27-ish, because wherever Chris Paul went was going to piss off 95% of the general managers because they couldn't get him. And another big thing was with the Clippers is they got Chris Paul at a discount because of what do you call it? Not just the NBA lockout and new collective bargaining agreement. It was cheaper to get Chris Paul in this trade than it would be to sign him in the offseason.
So what it seems like to me, at face value, taking a step back, not being as involved in basketball as I am now, it seems like, yeah, there was going to be a lot of pissed owners, but there would be a lot more pissed if he went to Los Angeles or New York. He went to the teams in those places because those are the teams that they would build upon from a player like that.
This is where all David Stern has to say is swallow his pride, because I don't get, our EP damages this all the time, there's an ego to a lot of commissioners, right? And of course their decisions come under heavy scrutiny. But in David Stern's case, and I guess this is a lot easier said than done, but it seems to be too difficult for him to say, I didn't want Chris Paul to go to the Lakers or the Knicks because I didn't want Chris Paul to make it, for there to be a competitive imbalance, especially with LeBron James on the Heat. Like, that's all he had to say. So he wanted to make the league more competitive, but that does intersect with what's fair. Like, just because Chris Paul went to the Lakers doesn't mean that he was going to win championships that year. Just like when LeBron James got together with his super team and the Celtics got together with their super team, they didn't win every single year. The Mavericks did in 2011, which, by the way, Mark Cuban was very vocal about the Chris Paul veto because he was pressing for it. Probably the loudest out of any of the GMs. Granted, he probably is the loudest out of all the GMs because it would have made Houston more competitive, and he didn't want to see Houston see a major boost from the trade. And so all David Stern has to say is, I didn't want the trade to happen for competitive reasons. You don't have to say, his reasoning at the time was basketball reasons. He was pretty much saying, it's above your guys' heads. I don't want to sit here and baby it to you because there's other things at play like money and the ownership being mad at me.
Yeah, there's nothing better. It happens a lot when it comes to commissioners. It's very similar to what happens in other sports where it's like, you guys wouldn't understand. It's business reasons. We'll take care of it. Like, just put your faith in us. We've got everything under control.
It's the because I said so reason that your parents give you. I want to eat a cookie. You
well,
can't
that's
have
the same
one.
thing.
Why? Because I said so. What do you mean because you said so?
Well, it's funny enough, when you were like 7 or 8, that was the gospel. That's all you had to. Well, my mom said so. So there's nothing else. But then when you start to get older, you even question them.
Can't play video games tonight. Why? My mom said so.
And it gets older, and you're like, but why, Mom? Why are you making this trade happen?
You start asking. Here, Mom, I'm going to bring you this. I will do 2 chores extra this week.
And then when you carry that capitalism across, this is what I learned in school. Bargaining agreement. All right.
Comment below. CP3 to the Lakers, what would have happened? Should David Stern just say, I didn't want the trade to happen, opposed to, what trade? There was no trade. Come on, man. Francis _Maxwell on Twitter, JasonRue91. See you next time.